Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings. So Dan, welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. So I'm Dan Sherrard-Smith. I'm the founder of MotherTree. So MotherTree is an online platform which gives you the carbon footprint of your money. So we think it's the first of its kind, certainly the first of its kind for the UK, and we think it could well be first of its kind worldwide. But basically, if you have, let's say you have about £5,000 in a current account with Barclays, we know that that produces about 2 tons of carbon per year based on how Barclays are investing that money. Our mission is to make it really easy to choose the green option in all life's choices. So not only finance and banking, but also pensions and insurance, mobile phones, to go across that kind of full gamut. We've identified 30 areas where people can live greener without, having to go off grid and go to those extremes. And we just want to make it really, really easy for people to make those options, take those options. Yes, I think that's kind of MotherTree in a nutshell. And before this, I was on the founding team of Look After My Bills. So Look After My Bills was Y Combinator's back. It had the best ever deal on Dragon's Den. I think it actually remains the best ever deal in terms of equity to money raised. And we grew that company from 0 to 800,000 customers in about 3 years and successfully exited to go Compare a couple of years ago, which was very fun.
You guys were the yellow shirts.
We were the yellow shirts, yeah, with the infinity symbol, yeah.
I remember, the minute you said, I'm sure I remember that picture vividly.
Great.
Wow, that's great. So, because I was going to ask you how you got into MoneyTree, but I can understand why, because you must have made all the connections that now make MoneyTree almost work in some respects.
Yeah, it's MotherTree.
I'm sorry, MotherTree. Sorry,
probably my accent. Yes, so very much so. So I think in terms of how Look After My Bills worked, we basically figured out how to automate switching between energy providers. So anytime your bill went up, we'd automatically switch you to a better deal. And it's using that same knowledge, but applying it across multiple areas and adding that kind of green lens. So making sure everything we switch people to with MotherTree is sustainable.
So what drove you to do this? I mean, where'd the idea come from?
Yeah, so it was definitely one that evolved. I think the motivation to be in the climate space has been there for a long time. And sort of after Look After My Bills got sold, I did the earn out. So I worked there for about 1.5 years, and then I had some time off. And I was originally planning to take a kind of extended leave kind of thing. And my son was 4 months old, kind of looking forward to that. And within 2 weeks, found myself kind of diving straight back into ideas to work on in terms of how can I help with what's going on in terms of the climate. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wanted to be in that space. And so I launched what I called the Climate Challenge. And basically that was groups of kind of 5 to 8 people each month taking on different tasks to live more sustainably. So, we went vegan for the day. We got rid of single-use plastic. We found out our carbon footprint, and we looked at what our money was doing in terms of what our banks and where our banks and our pension companies put that money. And on those 2 things, people really started to take action, me included. And it's like, I found out that my pension was 2% in Shell and BP, and I could be vegan and ride the bike, and I am for the most part. And it's like, well, actually, all that good work is kind of cut out by this pension that I haven't even touched in years, going to companies that are sort of actively exploiting our world. So I moved my pension. People who went through that challenge moved theirs without me sort of prompting too much. And that sort of was the beginning of MotherTree, which was how can we make it really transparent what's going on with your money, and also present green providers who can help you in terms of making that green, but still get a decent return.
And do you see, now that you've been looking at the data, do you see a trend towards these sort of financial services becoming more and more green?
I think it's quite a hard one to call. What we've seen with the banks is there's a huge amount of greenwashing going on with the bigger banks. HSBC have been called out on that this week. There's some really good things going on. Lloyds have put out a note last week refusing to invest in any new oil and gas activity. They'll still continue their current investments, which I think is a couple of billion a year, but it's significant, but they won't do anything new, which is good news. So I think there's an element, and it's hard to know exactly how they'll deliver that policy until you see it in action, right? So that'll be kind of 6 months. So it's a little bit opaque with the big banks. With the small banks, it's actually really interesting. There's a big movement to go fully sort of green in terms of their investments, and we've seen that with people like Triodos. We're seeing new banks coming out. So Treads came out last year, where it's kind of fully green from everything they do. Even their credit card is green. So I think there's a really interesting kind of change here where consumers have started to move to smaller banks. And then in terms of investments on the pension side, it's very, very hard to call, because ESG at the moment is a bit of a minefield. It's really hard to know, is it actually green or not? And so what we use, and there are lots springing up, is just a data company who are really understanding of how those investments are being, how that money is being invested. And that is a really good trend. The more transparency we have, I think the more consumers will get in terms of, we know this is green and it's doing good for the planet and also for our wallet.
You mentioned the term greenwashing. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's tends to be a bigger company, but companies who say they're doing something green, but actually in the background they're not. And an example would be HSBC. So HSBC put out adverts about how sustainable and green they were last week, and actually they got banned because they're putting in 15 billion a year into oil and gas.
I understand. So it's like money laundering, but not.
Yeah, kind of green reputation laundering, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. And the data that you're collecting, you say using a data company, are they? I mean, is this tied to any of the sort of international, like COP and those sort of mandates that countries are supposed to sign up to reduce their footprint? Is it linked to that in some way or not?
No, not really. Lots of the investments we actually look at and the companies we work with do think about how they invest in line with the UN sustainability goals, but it's not like explicitly linked in the sense of it has to be invested down that particular route. Although some of them are, yeah.
And then your platform, I mean, how have you built that? Is that something you've built yourself, or you've hired someone, or?
Yeah, so we've got a brilliant in-house tech lead who did the kind of coding. I actually built the calculator in a spreadsheet to begin with, just to make sure it works and it's possible to do, and it is. And then he converted that into code. We've got a brilliant designer. Actually, my wife's a designer she did the initial designs, and then another designer's taken it on to sort of finish the site up. But we're all remote, actually, which is totally different to look after my bills where everything was in office. So we're getting this really interesting view on how to run a company both in office and remote.
And what have you learned through that?
I think that the biggest thing for me is, how do you build culture when you're working remotely? That's my biggest challenge. Is at Look After My Bills, it was really, you live it every single day with the same people. Almost by osmosis, you're sort of figuring out this is how we act as a group. And that's been very, very hard to replicate at a remote level. Not impossible, but you just have to have a lot more of those meetings where it kind of feels slightly forced to begin with. Like, here's the agenda, and then you get into it and it's kind of feels better. But there's lots and lots of pluses. Like, everybody now, I think, delivers just as good a work as they did. But, we have much better work-life balances. There's no commute. I can go and see my son, my 18-month-old boy, and hang out with him without having to get on a train and slug it back from central London, So there's lots of positives as well.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, the last couple of years, I think, in a good way, has brought everyone to the same level of understanding that it's possible to do stuff anywhere, anytime, on any device, and also asynchronously. You don't necessarily all have to be working at the same time for something to happen.
which is quite a mind shift, but it does make a big difference. And I think hopefully, not only with sustainability stuff, but I think that the generation of kids that'll grow up with their both parents being around because they were able to be, will mean they're more well balanced and well adjusted children that become well adjusted adults too. And hopefully, we all benefit from that as a planet.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a superb benefit. And yeah, I've definitely been able to spend more time with my son than my dad with me because he was commuting into London. So I hear you on that. And the asynchronous thing's really interesting. Like, I was kind of against it at the beginning of this whole remote journey, but it's brilliant. It saves so much time. And when you get it right, when it's really clear in terms of the tee up of the task, it saves like 3 or 4 meetings.
Yes.
It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, if you can queue it up that you leave, basically you leaving something and someone else is picking it up, and it's articulated in a way that they don't have to wait for you to come back to carry on, then your efficiency gain is huge.
Yeah.
Plus your trust gain is huge because the person taking it up feels trusted and empowered to do something. They build confidence, they deliver better product or an output, and it also takes the strain off you as a leader because you don't have to keep worrying about whether that person knows what they're doing or not. Which feeds your culture, definitely. So what's your uptake been with MotherTree then? I mean, if you had to give me a sort of growth percentage or whatever metric you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah. So we launched in June, deliberately grown slowly. I kind of have this philosophy of concentric circles. So you get it right for a small group, and then you can expand slightly, and you get it right for that group, and you expand. And so initially it was just literally my direct contacts. And then since August, I've been pretty active on LinkedIn in terms of what's going on. And 2 weeks ago, we launched the first bank league table where we show, from Barclays being the worst down to Triodos being the best, all of the banks in terms of how if you had £1,000 in a current account, how much carbon would that be producing with each bank? That got a really good reception. That's kind of had a nice sort of flow around LinkedIn after posting it and being picked up by some PR. But that's it to date. So it's all organic. Only me on LinkedIn. We've got about 500 customers so far, which is good. I think as an entrepreneur, I always want more, but actually it's fine. Like that's a good run rate. We're bringing in about 5 to 10 new people each day. And so it feels like if we put a bit of paid behind that, a bit of paid marketing, then we could really ramp that up quite quickly.
And how are you monetizing? I don't think I haven't seen that anywhere.
Yeah, so it's very similar to Look After My Bills. So we take a small commission from suppliers when somebody switches.
Okay, so that's a good model.
Yeah, and what I would say on that is if there's a greener bank that isn't paying us commission, we'd still promote that green bank. And, we'd rank it on how green they are. So we want to do what's right by the customer and the planet, as well as, make a profit so we can keep running this thing.
Sure. And I suppose when you're looking at your ranking system or your rating system and the sort of value to the customer, not only on the green side, but also potentially value that product provides them, do you look at that sort of stuff? Like, I mean, you mentioned Barclays. So Barclays might offer some great services that go with what they do versus maybe, I don't know, you mentioned HSBC, maybe they don't offer as good a service or as sustainable. Do you look at that kind of stuff, or is it just about how green they are, the ESG stuff?
It's a brilliant question. So currently on the site, it's just how green they are.
Yeah.
But we're developing a new service called the Green Concierge Service, which looks at it in a much more holistic way. So we take our time to understand what are your values and what's important to you, alongside the sustainability piece. And then we go and find providers based on that. And across all of those 30 areas that I mentioned, so banking, insurance, even things like diet. And so we want to make it really, really easy on that service. You either tell us what you want and us to go and align the options that exist already out there with that. So we cut out about 40 hours of research time, and we save people on average I think it might even be $3,500 with that service, but it's still in beta. But I'm very, very excited about where that's headed.
So you mentioned saving there. I mean, That $3.5 grand, is that just the carbon save, or is it actually a tangible money?
That's monetary saving. Yeah, that's in your pocket saving.
Wow,
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's not. We haven't published it on the site. It's still in beta.
Sure.
If it continues to go well, we'll release that into the next concentric circle. So we'll release that onto the site for other people to get involved. Yeah.
And then, are you facilitating the switch like you did with the billing platform?
The plan is to do that.
Yeah.
Currently, we don't. So currently, especially for financial products, we probably wouldn't ever do that. It's people's money.
Yeah.
But for things like energy, broadband, insurance, there are lots of other areas where I think it absolutely does work, and we would move into that space. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the energy situation at the moment, I'm sure there's opportunities there still for switching. Although I don't know how that's going to play out now with the caps moving higher and higher. I don't know if you know anything about that, but
yes, it's probably one we keep in our back pocket for a while. The market's pretty flat at the moment. Very, very hard to move and get a saving at the moment. So the advice is to stay tight with your current provider if you possibly can, if you've got a deal under the cap. So yeah, that'll be a product we develop once the market comes back.
Okay, great. And plans for the next 6 months? Anything you want to talk about that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, well, so the Green Concierge service is definitely one. Definitely keep a lookout for that. And also we run a community called the Climate Challenge, which I mentioned at the start of this call. I've just kept it running. It's really interesting. So basically, it's now a week long, but over a week, we look at the most impactful tasks in terms of reducing carbon and impact on your wallet.
Yeah.
In terms of positive impact on your wallet. So we go through a week, and as a group of sort of 5 to 10 people each time. So you get a kind of intimate group, you get support, you meet like-minded people, but you carve out time. It's only 30 minutes a day maximum, but you carve out time to look at the really big tasks. So that's the other thing to look out for. That is live and on the website. Yeah.
Great stuff. Beyond that, anything else you want to share with anyone?
Anything else you want to share? So, I mean, definitely check out my MotherTree.com. That's the main thing. Like, make sure the impact of our money has much more of an impact than I think we realise. Certainly for me, than I realised, and for 3 reasons. One is if we're in a bank that's heavily investing in fossil fuels like Barclays and HSBC, moving it out of that bank sends a really clear signal. As long as you're clear on the service you want, most banks can deliver that.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to switch than ever before. It takes 5 days. The number one is we can have a tangible impact on the carbon straight away. Number 2 is it doesn't have to come at the impact to your wallet. So Triodos, who are the greenest bank, have had a better interest rate than Barclays every single year they've been in market. So you actually can get a bit more money by going green, which is really cool. And then the third thing is, if you think about, for me, this really clicked when I realized, like, what's the point of retiring into a world where, I can't go outside because there's toxic air or it's 50-degree heat over the summer. That's not the world I want to retire into.
Yeah.
And so understanding where our money's going is like literally funding the businesses we're going to have in the next 5 to 10 years and making a decision. Actually, I don't want to fund, oil and gas, or it might be factory farming, whatever values that you choose to stand for, and saying, actually, I prefer to live in a future where we have renewable energy and sustainable food sources. And you can make that happen through your bank and through your pension.
Yeah.
So those are the three big takeaways, I think.
Fantastic. I think that's great. And I think it's something that we need to be, as individuals, pushing ourselves to do, because it'll change. Using your ring analogy, thinking about ripples on a pond, if each of us does something, that those ripples get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So I think it has to happen. Great. So you mentioned your website. Anywhere else you want people to come and look?
I mean, feel free to check out my LinkedIn. It's Dan Sherrard-Smith. And yeah, I'd say those are the two main areas.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to seeing the results from people listening to this.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter at the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website, www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website, www.digitalworkspace.works, and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.